Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I guess we can start and the others will probably join. I would like to welcome you to our webinar on extended producer responsibility. And this first episode part will be dedicated to Sweden, but not only to the country, which is considered as cradle of extended producer responsibility. We will also address the topic of the background of extended producer responsibility, as well as the future outlook. Together with me, I would like to welcome Professor Thomas Lindhqvist, professor at International Institute at the University of Lund, the Institute for Industrial Environmental Economics. And Professor Lindhqvist, after a short introduction about the present situation in Sweden, will talk about the history of extended producer responsibility, as well as the future of this successful, as we know, environmental policy. Right now, we will talk a little bit about the transition of extended producer responsibility in Sweden, as this is, I think, a very interesting example that can serve the purposes of the development of extended producer responsibility on the global level. And let's look a little bit about the context. In Europe, we have 190 packaging waste per capita and year. And by 2030, half of that will be plastic packaging. So the challenge is enormous. And in Sweden, with regards to the packaging waste, we have two systems. On the right-hand side, you see the picture symbolizing a deposit system for beverage containers. Actually, this year, it has been 40 years since this collection methodology was introduced for single-use beverage containers. 1984, aluminum metal cans became subject of the deposit system. That collection method was known from refillable bottles. Earlier, the system used by producers to guarantee the collection of the refillable glass bottles. But for the first time in Europe, in Sweden in 1984, this methodology was used for a collection of beverage containers. And today it's not only the successful system in terms of collection, but also a very good example of circularity. And on the left-hand side, you see the symbol of extended producer responsibility for packaging as it has been in Sweden until recently. Brink type collection points. The collection of other than beverage containers in plastic and aluminum has happened through the collection locations placed all over the country. It has been operational and financial responsibility of the producers, manufacturers. But as of 1st of January this year, this responsibility has been taken over by Swedish municipalities. The industry, producers and importers, pay through their producer responsibility organizations to the Ministry of Finance, and the financial means for the collection of other than beverage packaging types are redistributed to the municipalities according to the algorithm agreed between the municipalities and the industry. So we can say that as for the packaging other than plastic bottles and aluminum cans, now Sweden is in transition. I would like to also touch upon a little bit on deposit systems and why is there a certain collection method for packaging that are beverage containers. This is happening for 3 reasons. And now, February 2024, there are 16 European countries with deposit system as collection method for single-use beverage containers. First reason is that this fraction of packaging is extremely numerous. There are countries in Europe where the packages and in the scope, normal traditional scope of DRS exceed 400 units per capita a year. In Sweden, we do not consume as much water. We are very good at drinking water from the tap. We have as many as 300 containers per capita and year. And everything started with metal can in 80s. They started creating the problem. It was lightweight packaging, easy to litter in the nature. And of course, a lot of that as people consumed more and more. So first reason is quantity. The second, volume. Those containers take up a lot of volume in either bins that are placed at the curbside or in brink systems, or as we can see on the picture here, in the containers dedicated for waste on the go in public spaces. Third thing, and we know that from Sweden, to prevent litter, the system based on deposit was implemented in 1984 to prevent litter. And we know that unfortunately 80% now of the litter that we see in the environment in the countries that do not have deposit systems consist of beverage packaging as well as food vessels. So those are 3 reasons why we need a deposit system for collection of beverage containers. We need the motivating deposit value. We need to, for environmental reasons, for climate reasons, also go back to the shop and return the packages there. As I mentioned also, deposit systems are now the best example of extended producer responsibility, where producers are operationally and financially responsible for the collection. And as we also see here in Sweden, the system contributes to circular economy, has been contributing since 2009 for those many years. Until now, Sweden has been able to close the loop for plastic bottles. On the left-hand side, you see the plastic bottles fraction collected within the deposit system by the Swedish company Returpack, and on the right-hand side, the production of flakes and naturally later being substrates to the production of new bottles. Now, talking about other packaging waste, as we know, it's not only bottles and aluminum cans. I would like to address the transition that is happening these years in the Kingdom of Sweden. And it all started in 2018 with the new circular economy package. And one of the results of the directives that were implemented was a new calculation method of recycling. So it was not just collection, but the only amounts that were appointed and transported to the recycling facilities were counted within the targets imposed by the European Union. Sweden started reporting according to those new methodologies already for the year 2020. And there started the big media scandal. The situation was even described at the weekly program Swedish News. It's a little bit parody of the news, but that's how far it came. And I think in Sweden we all thought that we were very good and the champion in recycling. Unfortunately, it turned out that only 15% of the plastic packaging waste was appointed for the material recycling. The rest was incinerated, and that gave the incentive to deep dive into this situation and problem. The expertise for the parliament was elaborated. It resulted with publicly available information that there are, for example, not enough not dense network of the collection points within the extended producer responsibility scheme for packaging, that there are a lot of packaging waste, especially plastic packaging waste, that are not reported. So it was huge free riding discovered. And the result of that was the legislation in 2022, July, that shifted the responsibility for the collection from the PROS, producer responsibility organizations, to the municipalities. As of this year, 1st of January, municipalities took over the collection responsibility, and they are compensated by the producers. It's not the end of the changes. In 2027, 1st of January, all municipalities need to secure that packaging waste is collected curbside. So the pictures you can see on the left-hand side of the slide will probably become the history in some years. This is the typical brink collection point when the citizens in Sweden have to come to and empty their bags with packaging waste. We all hope that shifting towards municipalities and, more importantly, collection curbside, so directly from the households. That is how it can look in the future at in my garden. Will result with more packaging waste collected and furthermore better circularity. That would be all in terms of the introduction and a little bit information on the current development in the Kingdom of Sweden. And now I would like to give word to our honored guest today and the keynote speaker, Professor Thomas Lindhqvist. The floor is yours, Professor Lindhqvist.
Thank you. I'm happy that Anna has led you into the Swedish situation, because I don't really want to speak too much about Sweden today. I want to speak about the history and the future. And Sweden is, of course, a bit part of this. And some of the problems which have been raised, I may comment as we go along, but I would like to give you a general introduction to the idea of EPR, why it came and what it wanted to achieve. Some words about where we are today and how we could go further. And I will bring up some of the things which are not part yet of what the Swedish government and society is really planning, but what I find necessary. So can I have a second slide? So let's go back to the late 1980s. We can say this is when you are starting to create a momentum for what became EPR. And why did this happen? Well, we had a development for decades where we were introducing new materials, different type of elements from the periodic system, We had plastics coming in. I mean, I still remember when plastics was very unusual as a material, and in many European countries, you hardly used it at all when I was a child. And we started to use more metals, more different types of metals, and so on. And with this came challenges for the waste management. And the challenge was not only to collect it, but how do you treat it? And it was more and more, because we were consuming more and more, and we still are consuming more for every year. And we are consuming new type of products. So the challenge continues. Now, what's the problem with waste? Well, we have to get it in. It shouldn't litter. So when people are throwing it in the nature and so on, we often don't manage to collect everything. So we have to bring it to some place. And then if we don't recycle in a good way or reuse the materials in some way, then we are probably going to have a lot of pollution. Pollution from waste incinerators, pollution from landfills. Some of this might, as a landfill, take time, but they are there and we haven't really solved the problem. So we do have a real challenge here, and people are getting aware of this. We hear more and more in the newspapers, on TV. We see barges with waste which doesn't find any place. Landfills are getting full. We have scandals around waste incinerators with different types of pollutants. And we didn't really recycle very much. And we were not clear on how to go further and what we could achieve. So can I have next slide? So let's bring this together and say, we have a challenge. We need to collect, we need to separate materials and recycle them. Preferably, we should have used the products for a long time and reused what is able to be reused. Now, if we want to go further and do this better, we are aware that this will take resources, and resources is money, and municipalities in different countries have different budgets and so on, but none of them have too much money. And it's not easy to raise more money. So we are kind of sitting in a difficult situation. People, society wants a better treatment. That would cost money, but we have so many other things where we need to use money. So where will we get this possibility? And it's not just money, because it's also we need to better know what we can do and how we should do it. So we need to develop our understanding, and we need to have a lot of research going on, and in general, we need to get society more involved in this. But we also understood at that time already that the challenge would be much less if we thought about this when we were designing the products. If we avoided the biggest problem, if we didn't put things together in a way which made it difficult to separate the materials, to use it. So we needed the design of products to be involved. And this is the time when I came into the field. I started to work with waste issues in 1984. And it was also a time when we were looking into how do you prevent waste, but mainly prevent waste at the production facility. And I thought that you should prevent waste also from the products which we are consuming. And in 1990, I got a nice opportunity. We had a new Minister of Environment that had earlier been taken care of by the Minister of Agriculture in Sweden. But now we got a new ministry, we got new people, we got people who had not worked just with this for decades, and they wanted to do something new. And I was asked to write a report what we could do with the products. And while doing this, by looking at what is done in Germany, what is done in Austria, Netherlands, the Scandinavian countries, and so on, I got the idea that we should push more responsibility to the producers. And there are several reasons for this. The leading reason is that they are the only one who can really change the design of their products. They are also selling their products, and we could imagine that part of the price should be what it costs to take care of the waste. So there was a way of raising money to take care of waste by adding it to the price of the products. So in short, you wouldn't pay taxes and fees to the municipalities, but you would add some cents to the price of a product. So can I have a next slide? This resulted in a report where I invented something called förlängt producentansvar in Swedish. And as it sounded interesting when we were thinking more about it, we organized in 92 a conference inviting some of our colleagues in mainly European countries, but also someone from US and etc. And then I had to translate to English, and it became extended producer responsibility. And looking back, I must say that it did spread rather quickly. Normally, changes in the policy field are slow, and it takes time. But there was preparedness. Many had very similar ideas about what we needed to do, and it came in, and we started to see the Germans had already started a work which was very, very similar to my ideas. And I learned a lot from them. And they were also able then to come with ready things much earlier. We'll come to that in a second. So let's take the next slide. So EPR, what is it really? In my view, and also what you find in the legislation, etc. If we try to understand it, it is, as I already said, consumers are paying for the waste management, not to the municipalities or other organizations, but when we are buying the products. And this money is used then to pay for waste management. That means that you're including the waste cost when you are selling the products. And you know that anyone who's selling products want to have a lower price. And we're prepared to change their products, design them in a different way in order to be able to sell them at a low price. So if a waste cost is involved, they would try to get the waste cost down. And we would get these design improvements. We would have money because we are collecting it, and we will have incentive to design it better. Why was this accepted by society? Well, one of the reasons was that we were helping the municipalities. We gave them a way of finding a solution towards the waste problem, which didn't mean that they had to raise the taxes, they had to collect more money as a municipality, but someone else would do that. So you can say that municipalities were probably a very big political reason why this happened. And I know for sure that it was in Sweden. Now, municipalities didn't like all of this because to be responsible for waste management means that the money for waste management will flow through the municipal organization, and you will have not only more money flowing through, but you will have more people involved, you will have more bosses, and etc. So when we look at what is happening now in Sweden, we can say we are moving back this activity to the municipalities. In reality, it's not so much the municipalities doing this as they are now organizing it, because they are mainly using private waste management companies. So what they get is a way of coordinating the things, and they have been asking for that. They haven't always been happy with the way industry coordinated things in Sweden. And they wanted to do it on their own. Now, you could say, does this change much? Well, maybe the collection will be more organized. And at the same time as we are doing the change in where the money is flowing, we are also putting up some rules around, for instance, how to calculate what is recycling, when is something recycled. And that will certainly lead to improvements. So I would say the most important thing is not who's organizing it, but what you are demanding and how you are able to follow up what is really happening. But we will also come towards the next part of my presentation to why I think we need to do more things. But let's take the next slide. And here you can see that something which is very much an EPR system is coming in Germany in 91, their packaging system. It's paid in the way it's supposed to do. There's an involvement of industry. They are organizing a lot of this. We could also say that the deposit refund system, which Anna spoke about, they are also good examples of EPR. And of course, I learned from them. The deposit refund system started in '84, and I was looking very much was very much in contact with them. You could see this, that design played a big role in when we were developing new aluminium cans, when we introduced the plastic bottles. We looked into that they would be as recyclable as possible. Now, it wasn't just packaging. We got all the electrical, electronic equipment. We got cars, we got batteries. It took some time for some of them. It took until 2000 before we had a European legislation about electrical, electronic equipment. Some countries had it a couple of years before. And it took into the 2000s before we really had the systems for, on the European level, for end-of-life vehicles or batteries. And then we have introduced a number of other products. Can I have a next? When you see books on the right side of the slide, it's something which has been issued by our institute as a doctoral thesis and related to EPR. So if you go back and so on, you can get some tips. Most of these they are a bit old now, so it might be more or less easy to find them and more or less appropriate to read them now. When we developed EPR, it was important to look at what should be part of the legislation, really. And part of it was the question about the economy, financial responsibilities. How should that be organized? Another part was, how do you organize it physically? A third part is, how do you give information to all the stakeholders which need information and can use it? So this is part of the legislation. And that also means that EPR is much more a guidance for the lawmaker than an instrument in itself. We want to call it a principle of law. And we have many principles of law which are there to guide the formulation of more precise legislation. And I want to see EPR in the same way. Now, when you transfer it, it's important to understand that products are different. Plastic is packaging is a short-lived product and comes back very quickly. Cars, some electronics and so on, you can use for years and even decades before they come back, and you have to take care of them. So you need to think about these things when you are creating the systems. Now we can take the next slide. Here is the typical picture of how it looks like today. You have producers, they are paying the fee which they decide mainly themselves together to a PRO, Producer Responsibility Organization, and then they are organizing and they are using different operators, waste management companies, to do the work. And when you have municipality, as we are going to see today, municipality gets the money and they act as the PRO mainly. They don't do so much themselves, but they hire private waste management companies to do it. Okay, let's take the next. So before we talk really about what we must do, let's say what happened. And even if we can ask for more collection and better collection, we should recognize that in most of Europe, we are collecting much, much more. And we are sending it to some kind of more organized treatment. Not everything to good treatment for sure, but we have a much better source separation. And we are collecting this, and we are more or less doing something relevant with it. So the recycling is better than it was. But we are still downcycling, and we are downcycling most of the waste. Anna spoke about the deposit refund system and bringing back aluminium and plastics into the same type of products. And that's very nice, but we don't do that with so much. We are downcycling and using for lower purposes. And I'm often saying that what we are sometimes doing, for instance, with plastics, but also with some other materials, is that we are kind of landfilling it into, not landfills, but into materials which we are using, and where this waste or processed waste is not destroying too much. We put it into building materials, into roads, we put it into low quality products, and we too seldom bring it back to the same level of quality so we can use it for the same thing. And we don't do that because we are not good enough when it comes to the sorting and the recycling. We are not separating, and we are not designing the product so that we can do it. We had the goal of getting design changes. Unfortunately, what we have seen is that those changes have been far too few. And it has to do with the way that we are organizing the EPR systems. Basically, you can say a producer is paying the same for the same type of product of the same size, irrespective whether they have designed it well or badly for recycling. There's very little check and control of this. So it means that the one who is producing is not rewarded when designing it well. And we need that to happen if we want to bring back materials to good quality. Okay, let's take the next slide. So why do we still have problems? Well, for different reasons. One is that many governments in Europe and in the world are rather reluctant to really enforce legislation, reluctant to demand even a very good collection. And they are really, really reluctant to ask for good recycling. And part of not asking for good recycling is that how do you define that? We don't have the standards in many cases where we could say, well, this is what you need to do, follow the standard, achieve its results. So we need to develop that to make it possible. And we need to convince the government to really use it. Now, when you're not looking after something, you're hesitant, you get cheating. You don't have a control which would be needed. And in general, that leads to very low demands on what you are doing. And we see that throughout the world, I would say. More in certain countries and a little bit less in some others, but there's a general issue here. And then, of course, what we do have too often is that governments are not really doing their work honestly. And they are aware of many of the problems, but don't deal with it for various reasons of whether it's corruption or it's incompetence or lacking resources, but it doesn't happen. Okay, can I have the next slide? So what do we see, or what do I see for EPR in the future? I would say, well, we can always keep on improving collection. But for many of the more, let's say, successful European countries, this is not the big issue. I think it's much, much more important to put emphasis on how do we improve the possibility of reusing products and the materials by improving the treatment and the recycling. So make better use of the value of the materials and the efforts of making products out of this. Don't downgrade it by, let's call it, bad recycling. If we want this to happen, we need the governments to ask for it. It won't happen by itself. It's too seldom that the market will reward a company for this. So we won't see much. We see a few examples, but very few. So we need government to step in, and they must be able to formulate this into legislation and rules. So we need development of appropriate standards, quality references, and similar. Then I can take my last slide. So thank you very much for listening to me. I'm coming from a university where we have been working a lot with EPR, and we still try to do it. I'm largely retired, but I have younger colleagues, and hopefully we will be part of the development of also the new versions of EPR. And I wanted to illustrate this by my cat and my dog, and they are solving one of their classical recycling problems. How much effort do you have to wash, for instance, your packaging in order to be able to recycle well? And if you use a lot of hot water and you spend a lot of time, you use too much resources. And many of our economists, they are counting and saying, no, it doesn't pay off. There's no way. Not even if we include the costs and the benefits of environmental. And I think they're always thinking that we have to do things like we did. And here is my cat and dog doing it in a different way. We have no food residues. We have the cleanest packaging. This is a yogurt packaging, so it would take a lot of effort to wash it, but they do it perfectly. And we get some nice yogurt, so we like it. So thank you for listening, and I hand over to Anna.